Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we have a early impression video on a house that has never made an appearance on my channel. It's actually a brand new first timer on my channel. Not a new house, but a first timer on my channel. The house is called St Giles. And so St Giles is sort of a niche luxury house that is born in the heart of London, they say. And I think most of their fragrance have come out maybe within the last year or so. They've used perfumers like Bertrand Duchaufour. Michael Donovan is the creative director. And it is his personal passion for fragrance, it says. Working with the greatest talents in the industry. You've heard this story before. Not a house I know very much about. This is actually the very first time I've smelled a St. Giles fragrance, and it's going to be probably the one I'm most interested in from this house, and this one's called The Mechanic. Now, before we get into this, I have to say, if you've watched some of my previous videos, you've heard me give one of my favorite quotes of all time from John Donne, and it says, "No man is an island unto himself." So every man is influenced by the people around him, the setting that he lives in, the time that he lives in, and you could take that man and just substitute it for person nowadays. And same thing for anyone who lives on this planet is subject to sort of the time period that they live in. And so first of all, I want to say thank you to the people who are around me, people like Nick who have sent me these very generous samples that I can do these videos of. Otherwise, I never would be able to. The first thing. The second thing is I want to answer a little bit of a criticism where I've had some people previously come on or in the comments and say stuff like, "Why do I care what you think? You're just an average person. You're not a perfumer. You're not in the industry." And this channel, while we are a very tiny channel in the grand scheme of things, we are almost irrelevant when you look at the numbers. There's obviously channels with hundreds of thousands, millions of subscribers, and we have our little 5,000 subscriber corner of Fragcom over here. But, you know, I don't subscribe to the fact that you have to be a perfumer or you have to be some sort of an expert to give your opinion on this. You know, I think there are some people that are just maybe jealous by the fact that there are folks out there who have got to smell so many fragrances. You look at people like myself or Rich Mitch, we're not in the industry, but we smell a lot of things as time goes on. And smelling a lot of things gives you perspective, you know, and you don't have to be a professional, I don't think, to get on here and give your 2 cents. I mean, look at what's happening down at the southern border. I was reading an article today where Elon Musk went down there and he was live streaming and asking questions and showing the world through X, formerly Twitter, what's happening at the southern border. In our own news media, our professionals, they're not doing that. So now he's the richest man in the world. He can do whatever the hell he wants. But you know, that's just an example that popped in my head. You don't have to be a perfumer or a professional to talk about something like this and give your 2 cents. So, but before I do that, a way of saying thank you to people like, you know, Nick, and one is more goodies basically came to my P.O. box. So I have to say thank you to 2 people, Matt and A2. I won't use his real name, but he goes by the moniker A2 on the channel. He very kindly recently sent me a bottle within the last 6 months or so of a fragrance called Miel du Bois, one of my favorite honey fragrances that I've been hunting for a long time. I'll do a video on this one of these days very soon, but he sent me another bottle today. So there is some full reviews that I owe the channel thanks to the generosity of A2. And then my good friend Matt made sure I had this sample set because he said it's a house that he wanted to hear me talk about on the channel. So this is from the house of Argos. Are you guys familiar with this house? Because I am not. I mean, I know of it, but I don't think I've ever smelled any of their fragrances. So this is sort of the Argos sample set, if you will. And it comes like this. And this is what we are... Oh, we have a string. This is what we're up against. This is what we are up against here. So we've got Fall of Phaeton. How large are these samples? What are you? You are... you're 2 mils. Okay, standard 2 mil sample. I like the classical sort of romantic style paintings that they use. So Fall of Phaeton, Birth of Venus, beautiful painting, The Birth of Venus. Adonis Awakens. I'm guessing this is the whole line. Adonis Awakens. Danae. Danae is another one of their fragrances, as is Pallas Athene. Or Athena, I guess the goddess Athena. And Triumph of Bacchus. Beautiful. I love the painting. And Brevidio della Cassia. Look at that one. Along with Baccio Immortelle. He really likes her forehead, apparently, amongst other things. And finally, actually not finally, this is Argos Parfum and Argos pour Homme. Okay, so very cool. Very excited to dive into this house. So thank you, Matt, for arranging the sample set to be sent to me. The little baggie is kind of cool. I do have to get rid of this string that is not supposed to be there. Do some housekeeping. Okay, very good. So let me just put these back. This will make for maybe a hell of a live stream one of these days. The Argos live stream. All right, good stuff. Again, thank you. Thank you for arranging that to be sent to me, Matt. Very, very kind of you, my friend. So that's a house we can dive into. It'll go on the never-ending list of houses that I want to live stream about. Maybe do some early impressions on. So that's the first. And I'm just going to put you over here for now. The second is going to be the box that E2 sent me, which I know what's in here, so I'm very, very excited. Very, very excited indeed. So this is very well packaged, first of all. Okay. So, this has been on the list for a long time. And it is a vintage version of a fragrance that I know Mark from the Robes 08 channel absolutely loved this fragrance. And I actually have the modern, but I was very curious if there were differences in the vintage. And this fragrance is called Mona di Orio's Cuir from 2010. So this is actually the original packaging of what they looked like when it originally came out, when Mona di Orio was still alive. Unfortunately, she sadly passed away. Actually, if you go to Parfumo and type this fragrance in, okay, Mona di Orio's Cuir. If you go to Parfumo and type this in, you'll see that it says the production was apparently discontinued. So if that's true, what an absolute travesty, because this is their best fragrance. This sort of burnt leather, ashy, green, absinthe, castoreum, cardamom, apopanax, cade juniper. I love the old caps with sort of the like champagne cork opening. I really like these bottles. I'm really pissed off they changed it to the new bottles. So this is the first time I've ever held one in my hand. I like it even more now that I've had it holding it in my hand. Brilliant packaging. So thank you, A2. Very, very, very kind of you, my friend. Can't wait. So comparison video potentially to come, but very excited to have that. So thank you very much. That is a very kind gift, and that is a gift. I did not pay for that. He sent that to me as a gift. So, gifts I get to keep. So, thank you, A2. Very, very kind of you. Okay, so, that is the unboxing session. So, we've got the Argos samples, and then the Mona di Orio Cuir. which I'm very excited to get to wear and compare. Some people compare it to vintage Giacomo de Giacomo, which I could totally see that. So let's start and talk about the Mechanic a little bit. So first of all, the Mechanic is a fragrance that came out in 2017 by the House of St Giles, and it's classified as a spicy, leathery fragrance. So the top notes are listed as geranium and patchouli, with a heart of leather and castoreum, with a base of musk, rubber, styrax, and oak moss. So Bertrand Duchaufour, to me, is the magician. He's really one of the perfumers that truly, properly got me into incense. The way he uses incense and works it into the storytelling of his fragrances is bar none, top of the line. He's one of my favorite perfumers. And he also knows how to work in these very strange notes. So sometimes you'll see him use things that you just don't see very often. Lychee and peony and these kind of mangoes and, green mango, stuff like that. And sometimes it goes on and he's able to put notes together that sometimes just don't seem like they would work, especially in fragrances like Zonka, which I absolutely love. And, there are other fragrances he did, like Timbuktu. You wouldn't think some of that mango, Isoe Super, vetiver thing works, but it does. And so Bertrand Duchaufour is a perfumer I really, really respect. Of course, Jubilation 25 is going to be reviewed, a full review from me at some point in the future. But this one is kind of one of those Bertrand Duchaufours that always slid under the radar for me. I knew about it, but I never got a chance to smell it. So the first time I smelled this, my head was like a pinball machine. It was like going everywhere. Like I started to think about, so you think about things like Mechanic, and as soon as I smelled it, I reached for Santa Maria Novella Nostalgia. But Nostalgia is built around a sports car. You can see the guy's hands on the wheel, but it's not really one for one, although the idea in the creation of the fragrance is similar. There is something about this car in the garage thing to Nostalgia, but the Mechanic basically opens up almost like you're smelling this epoxied garage. Okay, so imagine you're kind of, you know how you can sort of add this polish to the garage so it looks shiny and stuff doesn't stick to the floor. First time I smelled it, I got this spicy, almost like industrial feel, and it transforms very quickly into this industrial floor spice, and the spiciness over the first couple minutes of the scent continues to rise. Okay, so it's almost like the cumin spice that he used. I'm going to bounce around. There's going to be a bunch of fragrances shown in this video because this fragrance right here evoked many different ideas in my head. Again, one of the advantages of smelling a lot of fragrances. So you don't know what you don't know, and you can't smell everything. But when you do smell it, you can store it away in the old Rolodex, and then you can bring it back and talk about it, right? So there was a heavy spice usage in a perfume he did for L'Artisan Parfumeur called Oudh. And if you know sort of that cuminy, spicy concoction he made in the top of Oudh, there is this spiciness that kind of roars to the forefront. Now, the fragrance remains, I've got the dry down here and a fresher application here, but the fragrance remains slightly industrial in quality, but that cumin spiced combo, maybe some thyme, is executed in a way that allows the industrial quality to permeate the scent. So imagine you kind of are standing around a car, working on it, you've got your old Mechanic overalls on, and you're sort of got grease on your hands, and you're like, screw it, I'm just going to wipe it on my overalls, right? There's a little bit of that quality to the opening. And the spice note is interestingly executed because to my nose, and again, this is the first time I've given it a full wear, but Nick very kindly sent me enough where I was able to wear it to bed once before. So, so this is not the first time I'm smelling it, but it is the first time I am giving it a full wear today, and it's 3:30 in the afternoon almost. So I have worn it basically all day. Okay. So, so today, giving it, the full wear, that spice note acts almost like the linchpin that allows the fragrance to pivot in different directions, because in the beginning, it opens up industrial but spicy, and the spices roar almost like they're, the oil in your car is getting hotter as you start the engine, right? it's almost like the spices are sort of slowly increasing in the complexity of the perfume, and also the integrity of the perfume, the way the fragrance wears on your skin. That spiciness sort of just increases from a low boil, almost like it's coming, you know, from a simmer to a low boil to a little bit of a boil, like the oil in your car is heating up, right? And then what ends up happening is the spices allow the fragrance to pivot. And what I mean by that is that industrial garage floor quality tends to pivot on the spice note, and this pretty soon you'll notice that the spiciness starts to go from that boil back to a low simmer, back to a low boil back to a simmer, right? And what comes to the forefront is this vintage style 80s leather fragrance that really had me bouncing around like a pinball machine. The leather reminds me a bit of the way that the Jil Sander fragrance line was executed. So if you watched my videos from the Jil Sander fragrance line, I talked about things like Woman II, Man II, Man Pure. These Jil Sander fragrances are brilliant. I talked about Background, but really the older Jil Sander's fragrances are the ones where this reminds me of. Think about things like Jil Sander Man II, where that big castoreum leather note is there. Man Pure doesn't have as much of a leatheriness. It's a little bit there, but that focuses more on the soapiness, but it still has a little bit of that Jil Sander castoreum execution. And so those type of early 80s releases, the first 5 years of her running the house, let's say, because she founded the house in 1978. And if you know these sort of vintage leathers, like if you know things like this is Dior Jules, one of my all-time favorite Dior. Actually, if you want to see how highly I rate Dior Jules, go watch my my family portrait of Christian Dior, and just see how high I rated Jules. This is one of my all-time favorite leathers from the 80s. It was done by Jean Martel, who also did Paco Rabanne pour Homme. I wish the guy did more than just those two. But so what ends up happening is this 80s style fragrance begins to come into existence, okay? And you also, the spice, so along with the spice, in the first, let's say, half an hour to an hour of the perfume, what you notice is that along with the spice, there is this strange, almost billowing green fume that comes to the forefront. So imagine like you took this earthy green notes, these different earthy green notes, and you fed them into the tailpipe, or you fed them into the car, and the car spits it out the tailpipe in the form of fumes, okay? And so what you end up getting is this sort of patchouli. My guess is it's something like patchouli, artemisia, sage, you know, or clary sage, or oregano, or something like that. Maybe a little bit of tarragon, those vintage 80s masculine notes, right? That would be my guess just smelling this. But there's none of that listed in the note listing. There's only geranium, patchouli in the top. Now, the geranium note is prominent. I will tell you that. When the spices start to cool, with, like, let's say half an hour into the fragrance, as the spices begin to cool down again, what ends up coming to the forefront is this geranium note that reminded me of another 80s fragrance. If you've ever smelled Alain Delon, there's a huge geranium in here. The geranium in here is spicy and green and soapy, okay? So vintage 80s fragrances had a little bit of this contrast, this dichotomy between dirty animalic leather and soapiness over and over and over again. And oh, it's so good. This is such a great perfume. And so the way that the geranium works in Alain Delon Classic, especially the classic version, which is, I know, one of the re-releases from Waruska and Joel as the distributor. I do have the OG. I do have a bottle of the OG from Alain Delon that didn't say classic, but this is much greener in a way that doesn't bring in the soapy qualities as much as the classic version. So I'm specifically referring to the classic iteration of Alain Delon. But the fragrance top has that very spicy, aromatic, sort of green touches with the patchouli and slightly herbal, and slowly gives way to that leather castoreum combination that I absolutely love, okay? Absolutely love. big throwback to my favorite 80s fragrances from the past, you know? If you like things like Leonard pour Homme, if you like things like Dior Jules, if you like those type of perfumes, I would highly encourage you to check out the Mechanic. If you like the Jil Sander line from the early 80s, I would highly, highly encourage you to check out the Mechanic. So just imagine that spice melange giving way to this throwback style leather. And the leather note seems to come from the castoreum. So the castoreum in and of itself is a leathery note, okay? And some castoreums smell more leathery than others. Some smell more metallic, but pretty much all castoreums that I've smelled give off this warmth. And castoreum can also be rubbery. And so when you look at the note listing and you see a note of rubber, so, you know, that's a little bit, I think, so in my opinion, what's happening here is that St. Giles is trying to modernize a perfume category that is very vintage in style, right? So they're using this sort of modern mechanic with rubber and all of that stuff to give this very, you know, I would say, modern storytelling, stylized niche interpretation of a perfume style that is very vintage, okay? And if you know your vintage perfumes, you'll instantly get that. As soon as you smell the Mechanic, you'll instantly be thrown back into the 80s, especially those 80s masculines. Now, nowadays, it's very popular to just market these fragrances as unisex. St. Giles didn't do that. They actually marketed this as a masculine fragrance, and it feels like a masculine fragrance. If they marketed this as unisex, I probably would have said this feels ultra masculine from the old school, from the 80s. Although anyone can wear anything you want, but for me, these are the type of fragrances I always associate with a man. You know, that's just my up and down opinion of the way that this particular smell is isolated. Although I think anyone can wear anything. So if a woman wants to wear this, I mean, there's no problem with it. But I think 90% of people who wear this will be men. They'll get that traditional masculine, you know, it'll remind them of the days with their fathers and uncles and, you know, from the late 70s, early 80s. It'll remind them of that time period, okay? And so the Mechanic, so the fragrance itself is brilliant. I absolutely loved wearing it today. My kind of fragrance through and through, even though it's still in the 90s here in Texas. It's the end of September. It's September 29th today, and it's still in the 90s. It's hot. And so what's interesting though is as the fragrance continues to dry, the leathery note sort of turns into this earthy, rubbery, waxy Styrax. Okay, so Styrax can come across as very waxy, and you know, if you know this rubber, if you know the Styrax style to create a if you know the Styrax style to create a leather accord, this is a really good example of a good leather using Styrax, Cuir Styrax from Prada's private line. No one talks about this line. It's brilliant though. But the better one is the better one is the Cuir Ambre, in my opinion. This is more like a Russian leather. But this is more like a Styrax, proper leather build around Styrax. And Styrax gives off this sort of waxiness, right? And it's here as well. The waxiness sort of blends in with the rubberiness, and it gives you this awesome modern niche, but in a vintage style. And I say modern niche in a vintage style for a reason, because there's something that's dearly missing from this fragrance when you smell it. And if you're not a vintage freak like I am, if you're not a lover of old school, proper old school fragrances, you may have a hard time picking it out. In fact, you may not even care. You may smell this and go, man, this is perfect for what I'm looking for. Why would I try to hunt down a vintage bottle of something from 40 years ago when I can just buy this? It's still in production. But once you've smelled some of these vintage perfumes, okay, when you've smelled stuff like Dior Jules, and I'm not making a direct comparison, but I'm just saying imagine this style of perfumery, right? And then you smell what the modern niche versions of those fragrances are. So take something like the Mechanic, or take something like this, Je suis un homme by the house of ELDO, right? I have a full bottle of this. It plays in a very similar ballpark. This is Antoine Lee, you know, riffing off of that Bel Ami DNA, that very oily leather, But he added maybe some, liqueur or something to modernize it in here. Or take something like Biehl Parfumkunstwerke. And Biehl Parfumkunstwerke is a house that actually releases very good stuff. They partner with well-known perfumers, very similar to what I just read you from St Giles, basically, right? They want to develop fragrances and give the perfumers the freedom and on and on and on. And so they worked with fragrance producers like Mark Buxton and Giza Schoen and all that good stuff. So Arturo Landi actually made this one, and this one's called AL03, okay? And AL03 is a spicy, leathery fragrance that has many of the same facets as some of those old Jil Sander fragrances. So the reason I bring that up is that what's really missing from many of these perfumes, no matter how good they are, and I actually really like these. I think I like both of these even a little bit better than the Mechanic, okay? But I'm throwing it in the same pot, in the same style, is they're missing that vintage, old school, textured oak moss feel. Like the claws are out, you know what I mean? The claws are out and you can feel that twang. Vintage fragrances had this sort of twang about it, right? And it's evident when you smell it. When you smell a vintage perfume, many times, especially into the dry down, you will notice that vintage twang that oak moss gave it, or even the real castoreum that they used back then, or stuff like that. It gives this specific twang. And now that that's missing from many of these perfumes, for me, I would have a hard time going and spending $150 or $200 on a bottle of the Mechanic. I just would. Today, I would have a hard time doing that when I could spend that same $200 and get the bottle of Jil Sanders that I am still missing from my collection. I never hunted down a bottle of Jil Sander Man II. Never hunted down a bottle of Jil Sander Man or Man Pure, same fragrance, I believe. I've got a couple of very precious drops from my decant Duncan sent me, and that's pretty much it. And so I would rather take that money instead of buying one of these niche fragrances, which I have good ones that I can wear. If I wanted to wear this style, I could easily wear this. And it's very competently done, very well done. If you like fragrance houses like Frederick Malle, I would urge you to check out the house of Biehl Parfumkunstwerke. I absolutely would. It's almost like a Frederick Malle style fragrance house, if that makes sense. And in vintage style perfumery, right? But in a modern niche, not done in the, not done in sort of the, many houses nowadays will use like big Ambroxan, or, they'll use big Isoe Supers, or they'll use, modern amber woods, or this Middle Eastern style amber max, and this big big Middle Eastern style oud, but I don't think Biehl Parfumkunstwerke is doing that. Very similar to a Frederick Malle, in my opinion. I think the creators of both houses had similar thought processes in mind. But the reason I bring those two fragrances up is they're fragrances in my collection I already own that play in the same sandbox. They're not one for one. But I would say because of that, the Mechanic would be a pass. Now, I'm very happy to get to sample this, and I would throw this in, if you said, Ramsey, give me a couple modern niche leathers that I can go check out, I would give you something like AL03, I'd give you something like Roja's Great Britain, I'd give you something like this, Suis Homme, and now I could easily say the Mechanic is in that mix. Easily I could say that. I really enjoyed getting to know the Mechanic. But would I go spend money on it now? No, it's not going to move me to go spend the money. I would rather reserve that money for something of where my heart is, which is the true vintage fragrances that I want in the collection. That's something that really moves me, that I really want. Something like this, the Jil Sander Man Pure. Probably one of the best soapy fragrances I don't have in my collection, that 80s style soap, or, something like Jil Sander Man II, amazing, dirty, animalic, castoreum leather. So that's kind of my take on it. You just cannot recreate what they were doing in the 70s and 80s. You just can't. The modern ingredients aren't there. The stuff that's being used, it's not there. It's they may have more synthetics nowadays that do different things and all this stuff that they didn't have in the 80s, but they don't have the quality of the ingredients that were being used back then, and they can't use the oak moss because of regulations. They just can't. They can't get the oak moss right to do a proper leather chypre, which that's the other thing about the mechanic I was going to mention. It feels like a proper leather chypre. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe there was a little bit of labdanum in here, and that this is a proper leather chypre breakdown. I wouldn't be surprised if it was at all. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of those green notes that I mentioned earlier, the tarragon, oregano, sage, basil, artemisia, you know, that wormwood artemisia style that was so prominent in things like this. I wouldn't be surprised if there is a little bit of that in here as well in the mechanic. So to my nose, Bertrand Duchaufour made a hell of a perfume here. It's right up my alley. It's just, I'm at the point in my collection where if I would have discovered this before AL03 or Je Suis un Homme, I would have got this and say it fits right into that category. But I'm just at that point in my collection where I'm like, I'm going to wear the stuff I have. There's no need to go hunt down another bottle. I love being able to make the videos for you guys. Thank you, Nick, for, again, being part of making sure that I am not on that island I talked about earlier, making sure my nose always smells fresh stuff. Loved wearing this today, but for me, this would be a pass, just because I'm aware of where I'm at in my perfume journey. So, thank you everybody who participated. Thank you to A2 for the bottle of Mona di Orio's Cuir, the vintage. That's awesome. I'm so excited to wear it. Hell, I may wear it tomorrow. And then thank you for the Argos Sample set, Matt. Very, very kind of you. Thank you to everyone who sent me something. You can see I've got like a waiting list up here of stuff I want to talk about. So I'm going to continue to try and do as much content as I can for you guys. I love you guys. I love doing the videos. I hope you appreciate the time and effort and everything that goes into doing this. It's always a pleasure. I love making the videos for you guys. Do leave a comment down below. Let me know if you've tried the House of St. Giles. Let me know if you've tried the Mechanic and what you think of Bertrand Duchaufour's work. And just let me know what you think of modern niche fragrances trying to do that vintage style. So cheers. Appreciate everyone watching, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.